first time I noticed the sound, it came from somewhere deep in the trees, a faint, almost musical hum that drifted through the still air like the tail end of a dream. I'd been out there 5 days already, far beyond where the ranger maps ran out, following an old logging trail that disappeared into a tangle of birch and spruce. Isolation had wrapped itself around me like a heavy coat, comforting at first, but now starting to itch. I'd spoken to no one since I left the trailhead. My world had shrunk to the hiss of my stove, the creak of my pack straps, and the wind rattling the tent fly at night. That evening, the air was damp, the kind that presses sound flat. So the faint humming shouldn't have carried at all. But there it was again, just as I was tightening the guy lines before dusk, a soft, distant rise and fall, patterned, deliberate. It wasn't wind through the trees, it had rhythm, almost like someone whistling through their teeth. I stopped what I was doing and turned my head, scanning the timberline. Nothing moved but a raven gliding low across the grey sky. I waited, holding my breath, until the silence became something solid, pressing against my ears. Then the hum stopped. I shook it off as fatigue. I'd been hiking 10 hours through tangled brush and over wet rock. The mind invents companions when it's that empty. The next morning, though, I woke before dawn to another sound. This time it was muffled speech. 2 voices, low and close, as though someone was standing just beyond the tent wall. My stomach clenched. I sat up fast, unzipped the flap, and peered out. Only mist, dense, pearly fog curling between the pines. The voices faded, leaving only the slow drip of condensation from the branches. I told myself it could have been the creek nearby, water gurgling over stones in a way that mimicked speech. Still, I packed quickly and moved on, pushing deeper into the ridge country, trying not to think about how those voices had sounded like they were arguing. By the 3rd day, the forest had grown thicker, stranger. Even my compass seemed uncertain, twitching a degree or two every time I checked it. I kept hearing fragments, something metallic clinking, then silence. Once, when I stopped for lunch, I thought I heard the slam of a door echo faintly through the trees. It was ridiculous. There was no structure within 30 miles, maybe more. I laughed out loud, though it came out cracked and thin. "You're tired," I muttered. "That's all." Yet, even as I said it, I realised I'd started whispering to myself more often just to fill the quiet. That night, the rain came hard, drumming against the tarp like 1,000 small fists. In that steady roar, the other sounds returned. Music now, faint but unmistakable. A tune I almost recognised played on some old instrument, maybe a piano. The notes floated between the rain beats. Too complex to be imagined, too clear to be explained. I sat there in the dark, pulse hammering, trying to decide which was worse, the idea that my mind was unravelling, or that someone or something was truly out there in the black woods, playing just for me. I didn't sleep that night. The music had come and gone like waves, soft swells followed by stretches of stillness that felt almost worse than the sound itself. By the time dawn bled grey through the fog, my nerves were stretched thin as fishing line. I brewed coffee over the coals, my hands trembling, and told myself I'd hike out that day. But the problem was, I wasn't entirely sure which way out was anymore. My map had gotten soaked in the rain and dried into a crumpled riddle, the ink blurred to ghosts. I tried to orient by the sun, but it never showed. The whole forest seemed caught in perpetual twilight, the trees crowding closer, their wet trunks slick and black. I started walking east, or what I thought was east, along what might have been an old game trail. The forest floor was soft with moss, muffling my footsteps, and for a while it was only the sound of my own breathing and the occasional tap of water dropping from branches. Then, faintly, the noise began again. A rhythmic clicking, mechanical almost, like something metallic being wound and released. It came from ahead of me, then behind, then both at once. I froze, listening hard, my heart thudding so loud it almost drowned the sound out. I spun around, half expecting to see another hiker or maybe some piece of forgotten machinery, but there was only forest, thick, damp, endless. The strangest thing was how rational I felt. I noted each detail the way a scientist might. Auditory anomaly, direction indeterminate, repeats every 12 to 15 seconds. I even took out my notebook and wrote that down as though documenting it could anchor me to reason. But reason was slipping. I could feel it, like trying to grip a rope that keeps turning slicker in your hands. By mid-afternoon, fog rolled in again, swallowing the world beyond a few yards. I came across a clearing where the ground dipped into a hollow, and from somewhere down there came the unmistakable sound of footsteps crunching wet leaves, slow, deliberate steps. My throat went dry. "Hello!" I called. The steps stopped instantly. Silence fell so hard I could hear my pulse. "Is someone there?" I waited. The silence answered back. I could almost feel the empty air pressing against me. Then, just as I turned to leave, the sound resumed, but this time moving away. I followed without meaning to. Every instinct said don't, but curiosity, or madness, pushed me forward. The hollow led into a shallow ravine where fog pooled thick as smoke. I could see faint depressions in the mud, footprints, but they looked wrong. Too long, too narrow. I crouched down to trace one and felt a jolt of cold, like static, rush through my fingers. I stumbled back, breath sharp, staring into the mist. And then I heard it again. The faint strains of music, echoing from somewhere deep ahead, as if the forest itself had drawn breath and begun to hum. That was when I realised I wasn't sure whether I wanted it to be real anymore, or if I wanted it to be only in my head. Either way, I couldn't turn back. By the time I reached higher ground, the fog had thinned to ragged veils drifting through the trees. I could see the slope rolling down into another valley, but I didn't recognise any of it. The forest had changed. Same birch and spruce, same dark loam underfoot, yet it felt arranged differently, as if someone had quietly moved things around while I wasn't looking. My sense of direction had dissolved entirely. I stopped on a flat rock, dropped my pack, and tried to steady my breathing. That was when I heard it again. The door. A clear, solid thunk, followed by a faint creak, as though hinges bore weight. I froze. It was close this time, maybe no more than 50 yards away, echoing through the trees where no structure could possibly stand. I waited a long while, listening for anything else. Footsteps, branches snapping, the jingle of metal, nothing. Just wind sliding through the canopy. I told myself it could have been a tree cracking under its own weight, or a limb falling, but the sound had been too clean, too intentional. My mind, restless and frayed, started filling in details. A weathered wooden door standing alone among the roots. Maybe a forgotten cabin swallowed by the forest. The idea wasn't comforting, but it was better than the thought that I was inventing all of this. By late afternoon, the sky had gone pale and thin, and I made camp by a half-fallen spruce. My body ached, my mind was buzzing, and the silence felt alive again. I lit a small fire, more for company than warmth, and forced down some jerky. As the flames snapped, the forest answered. Soft murmurs that rose and fell just beyond the light. I couldn't make out words, but there was rhythm in them, like conversation half drowned by static. I got up and called out. The murmurs stopped immediately. Then, from somewhere unseen, came a single note of music, clear, sharp, and impossibly distant. I sat back down, staring into the fire until my eyes burned. The shadows around me seemed to move, not shifting with the flame, but pulsing to some inner breath of their own. I began to talk aloud, just to keep them at bay. Nonsense phrases, questions to no one. "You're fine," I muttered. "You're alone. You're just tired." But when I said the word alone, the fire cracked, and over the noise came a whisper close enough to stir the hairs on the back of my neck. "Not alone." I lunged around, flashlight in hand, sweeping the beam through the trees. Nothing but endless trunks and mist. Still, I couldn't shake the sense of something standing just beyond sight, waiting for the light to move on. I backed towards the fire and stayed there until my legs went numb. When I finally crawled into my tent, I left the lamp burning low, though its small glow did little against the dark pressing in on all sides. Sometime in the night, I woke to music again, louder this time, distinct chords, a tune that seemed both familiar and ancient. It wove through the forest like smoke, too real to ignore. I listened, breath shallow, until it stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving behind a silence so deep I could hear the rainwater dripping from the trees like slow applause. That was when I understood that the sounds, whatever they were no longer coming from the forest. They were coming through it and straight into me. The next morning came grey and shivering. My body felt like it had been wrung out, every muscle sore, every thought raw. I barely touched breakfast, just a mouthful of cold oatmeal before I packed and pushed on. I didn't know where I was going anymore, only that staying still felt dangerous. The forest was too quiet, like it was holding its breath. Even the birds had vanished. I followed the slope downward, my boots sinking in moss, until I reached a narrow stream winding through slick stones. The water was black and cold, reflecting the trees like bars of iron. I knelt to refill my bottle, and as the ripples smoothed, a shape appeared beside my reflection, a faint outline of another face, pale and still. I jerked back, splashing water over my knees, heart thundering. When I leaned forward again, only my own face stared back, wide-eyed and hollow. The sound started soon after, a slow, steady tapping like knuckles on wood. It came from somewhere across the stream, irregular but deliberate. I called out, voice cracking, "Who's there?" The tapping stopped, then softly a reply, my own voice repeating the words, warped and echoing, "Who's there?" I staggered back, slipping on the mud. The sound of my fall echoed twice, as if the forest had learned how to mimic me. I stood there, shaking, waiting for something to move, but nothing did. As the day dragged on, the forest closed in tighter. The trees leaned inward, their branches interlocking to block out most of the light. I began to think maybe I'd crossed some unseen boundary, some forgotten place where the rules bent differently. My thoughts frayed at the edges. I'd catch myself muttering, not just to stay sane, but to argue, with the air, with the sounds, with whatever it was that seemed to listen. Once I heard laughter, mine again, unmistakably mine, floating back from the path ahead. It was thin and cruel and didn't sound quite human. By dusk, I found another clearing. There, in the middle, stood what looked like the remains of a structure, maybe an old cabin or a hunter's blind. Only a few rotted beams were left, the rest consumed by moss and time. Yet, when I approached, the smell of old smoke lingered, as if someone had only recently doused a fire. My chest tightened. I stepped closer, brushing away vines, and found the outline of a door frame still intact, half buried, in ferns. When the wind passed through, it made a low moaning sound, almost like hinges turning. The same sound I'd heard before. The door that shouldn't exist. I stood before it for a long time, afraid to touch it, afraid not to. Behind me, the forest began to whisper again, those same broken syllables that might have been words. My pulse pounded in my ears. I reached out slowly, fingertips trembling toward the air inside the frame. The moment my hand crossed it, the sounds cut off. Total, perfect silence fell, the kind that feels physical, thick as stone. Then, from somewhere impossibly close, a breath hot against my ear and a voice soft as ash. "You found it?" I stumbled backward, nearly falling. Nothing moved, nothing followed, but the air around the frame shimmered faintly, like heat rising off desert sand. I didn't dare go closer. I turned and ran, branches whipping my face, roots clawing at my boots, until I couldn't breathe, even when I stopped. The silence followed me, heavy and watchful, as if the forest itself were waiting for me to listen again. I don't remember stopping, but when I finally caught my breath, I was sitting on a bed of pine needles, the forest dark all around. My legs trembled, lungs burning, and I could still feel that breath against my ear, that voice, low, calm, too close to forget. I didn't set up camp, I just stayed there, listening. The night had turned utterly still. No wind, no insects, not even the drip of water. The quiet, pressed in so tight, it felt like sound itself had died. I thought of yelling, just to break it, but part of me feared what might answer. At some point, I must have dozed, because when I opened my eyes again, dawn light had begun to bleed through the canopy. My gear lay scattered from the run, half buried in leaves. I gathered it mechanically, not thinking, just moving because stopping felt impossible. The forest was different in the daylight. Washed out, colourless, drained of anything living. I tried to retrace my steps, but every direction looked the same. The compass needle spun lazily, refusing to settle. And then, faint as a memory, came the sound again. That same tune I'd heard before, drifting between the trees, but this time it wasn't distant. It was all around me, circling, drawing closer. I forced myself forward, one slow step at a time. The music wove through the air like breath, sometimes fading to a hum, sometimes swelling until it pressed against my chest. Between the notes, I began to hear whispers, my name spoken in the rhythm of my own heartbeat. "Evan," it said, over and over, until I didn't know if it was the forest or my own mind pleading for me to answer. I clapped my hands over my ears, but the sound only grew louder, blooming inside my skull. And then, as suddenly as it had come, it stopped. The silence that followed was almost holy. I dropped to my knees, shaking, tears I hadn't felt building now streaking my face. I whispered, into the emptiness, "Please, I just want to go home." For a long moment, nothing. Then, far off, the sound of a door closing, soft, final. The air shifted. The forest sighed. Birds began to sing again. I don't remember how I found the ranger station. I only remember stumbling out of the trees sometime that evening, my face scraped, boots caked in mud. The ranger who found me said I looked like I hadn't slept in weeks. When I tried to explain about the music and the voices, he only frowned and said, "You were probably hearing echoes off the valley. Happens to people alone too long out there." He offered me coffee, a blanket, and the kind of smile people give when they don't believe you but don't want to argue. Still, when I close my eyes at night, I can hear it. The faint hum, the echo of footsteps just behind the tent wall. Sometimes, when the world grows quiet enough, I swear I can feel that breath again, warm against my ear, whispering words I can't quite make out. I tell myself it was isolation, fatigue, the tricks of a lonely mind. I tell myself that, but I never go far into the woods alone anymore. Because somewhere out there, beneath the moss and fog, I know the door is still waiting. And if I listen too closely, I'm afraid I'll hear it open again.